Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever considered binge watching YouTube? I guess some of you do that, but it's of course a hopeless thing because where do you start and where do you end? But where you start, YouTube sometimes decides. In last week's video, I of course added to your binge watching capacities on YouTube by making a very long video in which I kind of commented or added knowledge or took a different perspective, if you want, about Chopin's Opus 10 number 2, that's an Etude, as a reflection upon a video made by a wonderful channel owned by Cole Anderson. And so I was closing all the tabs on my computer and there YouTube's home screen was in front of me and another video popped up. And as a matter of fact, I was kind of intrigued by the title and thumbnail, but what made me just record another video for you about a colleague of mine being a YouTuber talking about Chopin was not so much the content of the video, which was actually great to watch. I enjoyed it very much. And before you ask like, wait, tell me what kind of channel you mean, it's this one. Again, a channel I've never heard of, which is weird on YouTube. But yeah, if you know how much content there is uploaded every day, every single day, it's maybe not so weird. The Music Professor. And it was particularly this video, again, you see it blows up on YouTube, 114,000 views, which is great because then the chances of landing on people's homepage, including mine, is of course bigger. But again, it's a wonderful video. I will link it in the description box and for you to watch. It gives a little bit of history about a piece, but also talks in a very nice way about the harmonic progressions. I mean, really enjoyed watching that video. But I decided to make a short video on this, not to criticize the Music Professor here, but just to add some information for the simple reason of this comment. And so the video is about Chopin's Prelude in E minor. If you're not familiar with that, it's this piece. So a beautiful piece. And again, go check out the video because there are really interesting things that you can learn. And so this comment pinned by the Music Professor talks about tempo, and maybe it's therefore that YouTube just serves me with this video. So he says, just a general comment about tempo, since quite a few comments have brought this up. Chopin's cut time meter would suggest, beyond question really, that the tempo is quicker than the performance tradition suggests. I suspect that Chopin played quite a few of his pieces faster than the subsequent performance tradition, and this is true of almost every composer because the romanticism of the performance tradition tends to slow everything down as performers become more indulgent with the material. And even when you hear a composer perform their own work, Rachmaninoff is a wonderful example, you're often surprised by the tempo and by the interpretation. So it's very important to remember that you simply can be over-fundamentalist about tempo. It doesn't work that way. There are no definitive tempi and there are no absolute ultimate performances. Music is much too fluid and can't be boxed in like that. Anyone who says this is the only tempo is fundamentally wrong. You can be convinced by one performance and equally convinced by another performance at half the speed. And Leonard Bernstein's famously slow performances of various pieces demonstrate that. For him, it worked that way, and that's fine. And it's convincing, but it doesn't have to be played that way. Glenn Gould had some interesting choices, and some of them are really very close to unlistenable, in my opinion. But I think he had every right to try it out that way. So where do I start with this? Maybe let's start with the remark that composers perform their work in a different tempo compared to the original. Well, I would love to see the examples. In the case of Rachmaninoff, we have examples of his piano rolls, in fact, where he plays faster or in speeds that are just unimaginable. Scriabin, the same thing. There are recordings of pianola, so automatic pianos, where Scriabin performs in a tempo that is actually seen today as like the pinnacle of virtuosity. Well, the book, we will talk about pianola recordings and automatic recordings, and automatic pianos and piano rolls. And we feature there an article that was a research actually that was described or was written out in a journal for pianolas. The name escapes me, but it's really not important. You'll get all the information in the book and you probably can find it. Although the article was sent to me by a subscriber, I didn't find it online. But anyways, the point being is that that guy, he dived into some original piano rolls. So the rolls that were used, that were actually there, where Rachmaninoff and other great pianists played, and that's apparently that's a rare thing, because oftentimes they were thrown away because they were serving only one purpose. It's like an engineer would copy all these pins, to another roll of the holes into another roll, correcting the mistakes, and then in some of the cases, and I think Rachmaninoff belonged to them, the original roll had tempo indications, like how fast the machine should play them back. And they were 20 to 30% slower than the final result. So the rolls that were copied and sent out as a kind of pre-CD recording, so to say, were 30% faster than the original ones. And it didn't surprise me, because we live in that time. The faster, the better. The more notes per second you can play, the more you consider to be a professional. So that in that case, we see a difference in the original tempo markings, I can understand. But if you go back into the 19th century, you should not project that one-on-one on Chopin, which is clearly suggested here. What you see these days is that people go and online, make videos and actually say like, these pieces that we play so much slower, you should speed them up. So we are destroying, so to say, the last resemblances or the last pieces of like a forgotten tradition. And now very soon you will see that we are going to speed these up, and with that will go also the last parts of the tradition, if you still can talk about a tradition. But anyways, when you talk about Chopin, when you talk about Beethoven, when you talk about Schumann, they were very strict in applying what they considered to be the ideal tempo. But let's go to the remark at the beginning. Like, it is beyond question that the tempo is quicker when you have cut time compared to common time. And that's a very interesting topic. And I understand when people say that, but it's not true. Cut time, eighth note alla breve, where you have only the use of eighth note, so a pure, I would say an old-fashioned, almost an alla semibreve, like in mensural time, like a Hammerklavier sonata is a perfect example. Well, when you halve the note value, you double the tempo compared to common time. But that's not true in each and every case. Here we have Kulak's edition. He keeps the cut time in this piece, but Chopin gives largo. Now, you can debate what tempo this piece should be played in. We have here a metronome mark by Kulak. Again, we play it in whole beat. That means that this tempo becomes eighth note 69, and that's pretty slow, yes, but he marks the piece largo for a reason. At the end of the video that we're discussing right now, there's also a clip. I don't know if it's a piano recording and then digitally converted into this beautiful graph, but we're going to play that because there are really some problems with it, fundamental problems that are only explaining by the much too rapid tempo. But if you go to Opus 10 number 2, that's an etude. We mentioned that in our previous video, but at the very end. You have common time here. That's the printed edition. As the first edition, Sir Chopin chose to have common time. He marks some piece with quarter note 144. Again, that's a whole beat tempo. We're pretty much, there is no discussion about that. And if it's the first time you hear about the WBMP, go and check out some other videos. It's unchallengeable. Why do I say that? Because we can provide you with so many tempi that are flat out impossible, of which we know that you are supposed to play them in the tempo indicated, which is the metronome mark. Just saying Czerny, Opus 299, but also take Czerny's daily exercises. They are just insane. And in the prefaces of those works, Czerny actually describes the tempi or the pieces or the tempo markings to be just your, not targets, like you practice the piece until you play the piece in the tempo I marked. So there is no discussion. We have hundreds of quotes saying that metronome marks in the 19th century were just accurate tempo indications. Well, that puts a lot of pressure on today's reading of the metronome mark, which is a single beat reading for the simple reason that it's not a practice that we hear reflected in performance practice today. And therefore, and that's a little bit also the point of my video, therefore you read the comments like, okay, don't take these tempi too seriously. Why do people say that? Because we got used to reject these metronome marks so often and continually, because of the reason that generally we cannot play them, and if we can, it doesn't make, or it seems to not make any sense. But back to the common time here. quarter note 144. There is a manuscript version of this piece, and here you see the edition of that. It's very unknown. I don't hear many people talk about that. Chopin gives cut time, so an earlier version, and there you see cut time vivace. It's the same piece. It's actually on an insanely more difficult level. You see here quarter notes compared to eighth note or 16th notes even. So Chopin later made the piece a little easier. I would say a lot easier. This manuscript version is just insane. You have to keep these quarter notes, which increases the tempo, of course, infinitively more. Now, this is a tempo indication as well. If you play that in half note 69, with keeping those quarter notes down, good luck with that. You are flat out going to destroy your hand if you are able to do that. But that's not the point of this video. Just compare cut time, half note 69, with common time, quarter note 144. The quarter note 144, and before you jump in the comment section and say, yeah, but maybe this is like half note 144. No, this is quarter note 144. We have enough editions. This is just a bad scan or a scan of a score where this is like a little bit of ink disappeared. This is quarter note 144. There's no discussion about that. But half note 69 is actually slower compared to quarter note 144. In fact, it's interesting also because he went from half note 69 to quarter note 144. Why would he do that if tempi are just like randomly like an about thing? Then he could have stuck with half note 69, right? So no, precision of tempo was something that they were very much concerned with. And so, again, the point of this video is not the tempo and whole beat, it's just to make you understand that cut time and common time, when you have 16th note notation, is in the 19th century basically more or less the same thing. The 18th century is a different story. Mid 18th century, early 18th century, later, like with Mozart, Haydn, that time we see more and more an evolution towards leveling out the difference between cut time 16th note notation compared to common time. And that's a wonderful example we have here. So just say, yeah, the professor music, I mean, you should be very careful when you call yourself the music professor. And I mean, I don't want to downplay this guy because, again, the video is very interesting. But to say, like, beyond question, Chopin's cut time meter would suggest a tempo quicker than the performance tradition suggests. I'm not so sure about that. And if you mean by performance tradition the way we hear that piece played today, well, that's maybe one of the last resorts where we, as I said before, where we can kind of hear what the old, very old tradition was. But if I take you to the performance here on screen of that piece, in which also you see some suggestions made by the author of this video, I want you to pay attention to the last quarter note. So just tap the speed of the eighth notes. It's very fast. The cut time is given here an importance that is ignoring totally the largo. Largo is not just adagio. Largo is like the slowest tempo we have. You have to see largo in a range of, like, compared to just the middle tempo. Let's say common time 16th notes, just the middle tempo, the tempo denario. And I know I'm talking about this like, and you may say like, wait, what are you talking about? It's also because I'm in the middle of recording a huge course on the notation and a tempi of Beethoven symphonies. I will go like as an additional feature of our full Beethoven experience. You can check it out in the description below. We not only get these symphonies in a 10 CD box with a beautiful booklet and everything up and around that, but also podcasts and also this course. That course will also be sold separately. So I'm in this matter now, and therefore I maybe overestimate your knowledge, so to say, on this. But the middle tempo, like just a normal, take Bach's first invention and just play that. That's like the best example of a middle tempo. Well, the cut time, of course, in this case, you have eighth notes, adds to that tempo, but you have the largo, which takes it down. I would say from that middle tempo, you go to adagio molto, then you are more than half of that normal middle tempo, and the largo goes even beyond that. So just ignoring that in favor of the cut time in Chopin's world where we have indications that the cut time compared to common time was not so much difference. I think the only difference that there was in that etude that I showed you is simply how much emphasis you put on the first and the second beat, the third beat, I would say. In cut time, you have very slow cut times. Otherwise, it would not make sense to use cut time here. In a largo movement, why would you want the piece to be faster and not giving into this largo movement? So there is a play, there's an interaction between both. But for Chopin, the evidence, so to say, that we have right now, there is an indication at least that for him, cut time was not so much of an influence. But when you do take that piece to a certain, I would say, too rapid of a tempo, and you're still musician enough, which this guy definitely is, hearing his explanation, see what happens when you have these beautiful notes of frictions, these fourth beats, what he does in the performance. Just, again, tap the eighth notes, and then you will notice that. And I know many people today do it like that. Maybe not so much as here, but it's to me like, why does nobody hears that? Like, you have a tempo in this piece. Again, I show you the score. Where do I see in this score that Chopin wants to have like tam 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 tam? Nowhere. There are just straight eighth notes. I would say the opposite, in fact. Chopin writes a score with eighth notes, suggesting a very rhythmical, similar approach. I'm not saying that you cannot emphasize the first beat a little bit, but the eighth notes suggest a very repetitive, I would say monotonous, do you say that in English? Like continuation of it, but not like tam, 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 tam. You only do that. The only reason why you would do that is because your tempo is too fast for everything you want to let the listener enjoy. And so as a final point, let's just share this video. That's the recording Alberto made. We published some of these preludes on my channel. So you will be shocked if you compare the tempo of this tempo of the video with the tempo that Alberto took. And again, we take 69 quarter note kulak and we play it in whole beat also. There is no use of pedal here. And you can say like, yeah, but that's dogmatic. I mean, Chopin obviously wants you to have pedal. Yeah, well, why is it then that Chopin's use of pedal was described by also his students, but like by anyone of that time and still today as being remarkable, innovative, and that he wanted you to use the pedal like precisely, that the pedal for him was like a tool of expression. But when he doesn't indicate any pedal, and in fact Kulak is respecting that, why would you then add pedal? Again, you can do that. But don't pretend that the composer would be fine with that, because Chopin was smart enough to indicate or to use the pedal sign. And I can tell you, this is very hard on the piano without double escapement. But when you master that technique, and don't underestimate what Alberto is doing here, it's extremely difficult, then there is an atmosphere that is absolutely unique. Again, if you're not familiar with the WBMP, with our work, you will be shocked, but allow yourself 10 seconds to be open-minded. And there is a world that will open for you. You will understand also the largo. And to be honest, you will understand the beautiful points that were made here in this video about the harmonic beauty. You will hear that. You will hear all of that without having to do any crazy things. There we go. That's all I've got for you today. Thanks for watching. We see each other very soon again. Bye.